Welcome to Convergence.fm. I'm your host, Ashok Shivanand.
If you talk to anybody who talks to me, I have one question I'm really obsessed with, and that's like, how do we turn real customer conversations into better product decisions? How do we do it faster?
On the show, we explore how purpose-driven leaders align their culture, operations, and experimentation to de-risk the decisions that really matter and lead AI-enabled businesses with clarity. Convergence.fm. Transform from the inside out. Most business owners are trying in some way to grow their business. A lot of the folks that I talk to don't really want to waste time or capital in the software and technology investments that they're making by building the wrong thing. The frustrating part is that a lot of the answers to the difficult decisions they need to make around this technology and other capital allocation is already in their business. But they sit in conversations that you're paying for behind sales calls, service calls, and other customer support databases. Welcome back to another episode of Convergence.fm. Today we're talking to April Palmer. She is the head of client partnerships at Duckbill. And despite that role, she has a huge influence on their product innovation there. And April is also a professor of product innovation at Virginia Commonwealth University. So we get to hear a lot of synthesized insights that she has from seeing many, many different dots around this innovation space. On the episode, we talk about how innovation isn't usually a big bang moment and it's incremental improvements on what exists already, but doing it with speed and intent. We also get to unpack the closed loop approach to customer discovery, how to turn customer stories into important and valuable de-risk decisions for your business, and how to earn buy-in from the people closest to the revenue, like your sales team, so it becomes a team sport that they're excited to play versus a chore that's being put upon them by the product development department. If you're looking to place big bets on innovation, or if you have frontline folks who have ongoing discussions with your customers, the stories from this episode are fuel for a playbook that can help you turn those conversations into very intentional and sustainable growth for your business. Here is our episode with April Palmer. Subscribe to the podcast to get future episodes as soon as they're published. If you find this helpful, give the podcast a 5-star rating on your podcast app or hit that like button on YouTube. Hey, I've been super excited, April, to have you on. I think you've got a career with a lot of range, and along the way, you've also formed some really strong opinions. And I love that you teach product innovation. And so we use this term, I think, with some level of ambiguity and is more of a feeling a lot of the time. When you do it in a university setting, I'm assuming that you've got some kind of framework or maybe a definition that you like to use to get the students up to speed and focus. So let's start with there around kind of defining product innovation like you do.
Yeah, it's such an interesting moment because my students oftentimes come in and think about product innovation as coming up with something brand new that nobody has ever thought about before. And we have a lot of conversations around the fact that product innovation today is actually more like product amelioration, where we're trying to take what's there and make it better, faster, more profitable, whatever that is. And so we do a lot of, when we're thinking about product innovation, we do a lot of customer discovery, having conversations. And that looks a little bit like what I would call a closed loop ladder. And so the first thing that we do is that we capture information from people, users, or not users, people who have started using something and then stopped. We translate that. So we turn their opinions into problem statements. We synthesize it, which means that we use everything that we've gathered and we create patterns around like frequency and impact. Then we decide what we're going to build, what we want and why. We ship it. And then we close the loop, which is we tell the customers what happened, and then we get their feedback on it again. And we just keep going around and around.
So many things that I want to double click on there. So, amelioration. I think that might have been the first time I've pronounced the word. I've heard it maybe more in like a healthcare or like public policy as politicians that I hear saying it.
Hmm.
And the first time that I'm hearing it in innovation sense. And I'm going to make some assumptions that it's not around kind of coming up with necessarily something very revolutionary or groundbreaking, but is chipping away incrementally at finding little improvements, and that is a very important form of innovation.
Hmm.
And I would tend to agree with you a lot. And I think oftentimes obsessing over the problem we're trying to solve and trying to find even incremental improvements oftentimes helps us understand deeper layers and closer to first principles of the landscape that we're playing in, which leads to the groundbreaking kind of revolutionary Big Bang as well, is my hunch. And
Yeah.
I'm curious if you've got more anecdotes or anything more specific to validate and validate what I'm saying there.
So you're so right. I like to use this example because it's simple, everyone understands it. For ages and from the dawn of time, people were paying other people to take them places in vehicles that they didn't own, right? Carriages and whatever. Um, Eventually that became taxis. That's a thing. And then you look at a company like Uber, and what they did was they took technology, as like the iPhone, right? And they married that with this really well-known mode of getting from one place to another. And that became like a massively innovative idea that regular people could just go drive other people without having to have a taxi license. But people have been doing that for ages, right? We're just doing it different. They just ameliorated the method by which we're able to get from one place to the other. Same thing with Airbnb. People have been paying people to stay in places that they don't live since the dawn of time. Um, and they've just changed the way that it's done utilizing technology. So for me, I look at those and I think, yeah, they're incredibly innovative, but they're really based in amelioration of a current process. So they've made it easier for us. They've made it faster. They've made a more dynamic kind of process and experience just by leveraging new technology that's out there.
And something that I've been working on a little bit more recently is working with more traditional companies
Hmm.
that are looking to kind of place bigger bets and finding kind of small steps to get started, and moving them in service of the bigger bet. So it's always important, I think, to be very audacious around profit, around purpose. But then getting started small is oftentimes kind of where my team comes in and helps people kind of get off the bench and get off the ideation and into validation. When it comes to these companies like Uber or Airbnb, they didn't go and try and sell software like routing software or an app to the taxi companies. They kind of organically or intentionally made a decision to go out and go direct to drivers in their case. And,
Right.
they did sort of start with the black cabs there, where there was some level of licensure and profession already in place. And in Airbnb's case, too, they didn't go and try and get sort of hotel inventory online with a better user experience and better software. They decided to go directly to folks with couches or an extra room. And then, now there's hotels that list on Airbnb as well, just
Yeah.
like taxi companies use the Uber app. And I'm curious, for advice for companies out there, maybe like a traditional home services, HVAC, electrical company, a construction business, who are being really audacious in terms of thinking about how to change their industry. And instead of kind of pointing them towards, let's try and sell the software to others, what's your advice that we may have learned from Uber and Airbnb?
Wow. I have so many things. I want to say I need to like gather my thoughts a little bit here. I
Yeah,
think when I think about taking something that is well known, we all do it. There's this movie. Have you ever seen the movie The Contender? And
I don't think I have.
it's got Jeff Bridges, and there's this moment, and he talks
Okay.
about the five wet monkeys theory. These scientists put five monkeys in a room, and they put a ladder, and they hang some bananas from the ceiling. And every time the
Hmm.
monkeys go towards the bananas, they spray them for like 5 minutes with cold water, right? And eventually, none of the monkeys go near the bananas because they don't get sprayed. And then they take one monkey out, they introduce a new one. When he goes for the thing, all of the monkeys get sprayed with water again. And so eventually that monkey doesn't go. Then they take another monkey out and they replace him. That monkey goes for the bananas, and all the other monkeys just jump on him and beat the living hell out of him. pretty soon the scientists have replaced all of the original monkeys. There are no monkeys who have ever been sprayed with water, but nobody ever goes near the bananas. Why? Because that's the way it's always been done around here. And I think we see a lot of these companies that are operating within a template that it works, right? It's fine. You can make good money owning and growing an HVAC company and doing it in the traditional way. But if you want to figure out how to break it, how to like step apart from the crowd, I think the first thing that you need to do is go talk to your customers. Because if you ask a customer who needs to hire an HVAC person, they are going to go, oh, right? Like there's a horrible feeling that they have to do this, which means that there's something broken there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the number one, like the very smallest step that you can take is go talk to all of your customers and ask them, what made you hire us? What is working? What was painful about this? Like, tell us. Care enough about us to tell us what we didn't do very well. And then synthesize all of that information. And then bonus points if you go to people who reached out to you and didn't buy from you and ask the same questions. Why didn't you buy? When you take that information, you can start to see where are things broken and where are the little things that you can do. You can maybe use technology. You can, we're all about AI. I think this is where AI starts to shine, where we can use it to reduce friction with our clients and create a better experience. But you don't actually know what's broken from your side. That's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the closed loop ladder before, and I want to get into this. And it's a related term that we use is a double feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first feedback loop, most of us are pretty good at. We set out to do a plan, and if it's the HVAC company that's got like a growth plan for the year, I'd say the better amongst the ones would at least have some kind of measurement system to see, hey, are we on track or off track for the place we want it to go? And an analogy that we like to use for the double loop is, the single loop is when you have a thermostat in your room and it is checking to see if the temperature is what it's meant to be or not. And if it's not, then, it fires up the AC or the heater or whatever it is to get to the temperature. And that's kind of making sure. And then the double feedback loop is asking the broader question of why are we maintaining this room at this temperature in the first place?
Right.
And trying to understand a little bit more zoomed out. And then, I think some people call it first principle thinking. And then it's usually a set of assumptions that come out from there that, the wet monkeys may have also been able to kind of eventually arrive at if they had some sticky notes and a whiteboard maybe, or some facilitation.
Right.
And then they start to understand a little bit more about like, hey, what are the things that like we've kind of been always doing this way? And the newer folks are kind of afraid to mess up the Jenga puzzle.
Right.
Because the more tenured folks are like, oh yeah, whatever happens, don't touch that brick.
Right.
And then, it takes someone to go and tap on it slowly and realize, hey guys, this is very cosmetic. This is not structural. Maybe we can kind of innovate on this, ameliorate, if you will, on it.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what comes up for you on that.
I really liked your example with the temperature, because I think one of the questions that maybe we don't always ask is the temperature the right one for the people in the room, right? Like, it's great to ask why we're trying to regulate the temperature in the room, but if we're trying to regulate it to something that isn't comfortable for other people, or the people who are in there, then that's also useless, right? People are not going to come into it. I think one of the things that we have to think about is that feedback without a return message is just emotional labor. Like, we're really just
I love that.
We're just doing things to do things, right? But we're not asking why. When I was a kid, my dad was maybe one of the most annoying people in the world, because I called him the 7-layer man. He would always ask why in one way or another. And it always felt like it was a million times, right? But I would say something like, will you take me to the mall? And he'd be like, oh, why do you want to go to the mall? Well, I want to, meet up with my friends and there's a sale. And he'd be like, oh, what type of clothes are you looking for? What's the event? And he would just go on. And like, for me, I was a pretty typical teenage girl. I really wanted to go to the mall because I knew that one of the cute guys from school was there and I just wanted to like happen to run into him. My dad could get to that, right? Whereas most people, I think, wouldn't ask enough questions to figure out what is actually going on. So as a kid, I think my dad had more of a thumb on the pulse of what was going on in my life than most parents do, because he was asking these questions. He was asking the right questions. And then on the flip side of it, he was creating an environment where he could start to influence a lot of my behavior by asking, the right questions and putting me in different positions. And I think that we forget that. Like, we just forget that we can do a thing, but if we're not asking questions around not just like, is this working, but why are we doing it? And how is it impacting people on the other side? And how is it influencing them to behave a certain way? And is that the way that we want to influence them to behave? And not to be like manipulative, but like, are there other things that we can do to influence them to behave in a different way? Then we're just like checking boxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And so if you want to actually move the needle, is that like move the needle, do the thing, you have to figure out, are you asking the right questions? And then you have to ask them over and over and over again in multiple different ways. And you really need to dig into 7 layers of why people do what they do before you can then feed that back into okay, how are we going to build something that aligns with that?
And a few things come up for me. First of all, I want to make sure that all the parents that are listening, when you're driving your kids to school and you ask them questions and you're getting barely any answers, like decades later, your kids may remember you on a podcast and shout out your Socratic questioning approach. Number one. Number two, I think, working with folks in manufacturing, especially folks who kind of study Japanese manufacturing, will oftentimes do a root cause analysis of 5 why whenever something goes wrong, to try and understand, hey, let's just not treat the symptoms. Let's try and find the root cause of this and eliminate it from happening altogether. And I think it's so easy to take that in the exactly same mindset and not just use it for when things go wrong, but also for the things that are going right. And trying to, and that, I think, similar to the mall example for you, it really helps you understand yourself better. It helps build a better connection and understanding between the listener and the facilitator. And ultimately, I think, coming back to, call it the HVAC company, in their case, they have, each of their trucks has 4 or 5 customer visits every single day.
Right.
And they're there to kind of fix a furnace, fix an AC or whatever. But there's also a real opportunity to take an extra 5 or 10 minutes and ask a few questions and apply some curiosity to the feedback ladder here.
Yeah.
Where you're able to then, not just get stuff done, but also find answers without having to make too many assumptions about your instincts. So I know this is using your Salesforce to do customer discovery is probably an opinion you have. So I'm curious to know what you think.
It is such an opinion that I have. I think if you're capturing in the field what's actually happening with customers, and then you're translating that into like information, data points that you can utilize to make decisions around what you're going to build, what you're not going to build, what you're going to test, how you're going to change things. And then using that as kind of the core of how you're coming to market, then it's a huge loss. Like, you have people face to face talking to your customers every single day. And that's hard to get, actually, if you think about it. If I were an HVAC company, I would empower the folks on my truck to have a couple of questions that I would ask them to conversationally, right? Like, we don't want to pull out like the thumbtacks and or thumb screws and interrogate our clients, right? But they can conversationally ask a couple of questions. But something that I feel like is probably an easier thing to implement than trying to get all of your techs to start doing this on their day-to-day and then logging it in the in their notes and all of that, because that's a big thing. And oftentimes I think that we forget that you can make a massive impact with your knowledge with very, very small actionable steps. If I own an HVAC company today, what I would do is I would take one person who maybe maybe they've been a tech and they've moved into the office, like an office role, so they know both, right? I would send them out every day for a week with a different tech, and I would have them have a conversation with each one of the clients while the tech is doing their work. And I would create a really great framework for what it is that you're trying to solve for. So like, what's going great? What are opportunities for improvement? How did you feel whenever you called us? How did you feel when this problem happened? Because that's a big one, right? Like, I think when you have something that happens with HVAC, people start to get scared. Like, there's emotions there. And a really thing that I think an important thing that we forget is from a stories perspective, we can capture some amazing feedback by having clients tell us stories. The fastest way to synthesize feedback is taking those stories and putting them into a system. So if you have a way for that person to document them and then create pattern recognition and then build clarity around those for product decisions, that's incredible. So you have one person goes out, spends a week going out with each tech. So that's what, 4 visits a day for 5 days. That's a lot of stories that you're getting back from people and a lot of feedback. Just start with that. It's a very low level investment as long as you have built a process around it and you're thinking about how you get that information back into the system and synthesize it. I think that you can make massive strides without having to completely overhaul the way that you are servicing your clients on a day-to-day basis.
So I love that you're talking about it this way. And this is something that we've gotten to do a couple of times where we do call it ride-alongs with, if it's a HVAC tech or if it's like a SaaS company, doing like a ride-along with your account manager. Maybe if you're trying to close like a big 3-year deal, adding like an extra 20 minutes of conversation about something that's not as pointed is not the best way. But oftentimes you're probably doing check-ins with your customers, whether they're satisfied or unsatisfied, and giving the account manager a little bit more of an agenda, or doing a ride-along, to your point, like as a product person, an innovation person, bringing a UX designer even along that can design some really core questions, feels like a really low-lift way. That being said, we've had to, really convince, like put some real effort into convincing folks that this is something that they can trust. We're not going to mess this up for them, something that they feel like is already a good gig. And we've also oftentimes compartmentalized for efficiency and incentives. That account manager, their time is spent kind of keeping this customer retained. And they're worried that maybe you're going to go in there and ask questions that might, plant a seed that leads to churn. The HVAC tech has an efficiency number of, hey, I need to finish at least 4 to 5 jobs, or this many billable hours. You're going to slow me down. So there's probably some tips you've got for us in terms of how to win over, earn the trust of the folks, the sales folks or the techs that are going out there, where they see the bigger picture. Maybe they kind of give you a little bit of rope that you can start to earn some trust on.
Yeah. I think the first thing is communicating. Why are we doing this, right? Like, we're not out here trying to make your life harder. We're not out here trying to get pie statements that we can put on our Instagram ads to get, more customers. Although that's great, right? Like, there's job security there. What we're trying to do is figure out how we can set you up for success from the beginning, which means that whenever you walk in the front door of this client's house to fix their HVAC, like, they're ready for you. They feel comfortable with the process. They have everything that you need to be successful with this. That makes you more efficient. Maybe you can get more calls in a day, which means you make more money. A lot of people are coin operated. I'm coin operated. Like, you tell me how I can make more money faster and easier with less work, I'm there, right? Like 100%. And then also you share with them what the process is going to be. So I'm not going to get in the way of what you're doing. I'm not going to tell you how to do your job. I'm certainly going to do everything that I can to to make the client feel comfortable. And even in these situations, there, I think about an HVAC company, and it might be more comfortable for a tech to have someone who has the homeowner or whoever a little bit occupied and maybe not looking over their shoulder while they're doing the things, right? So if we know that this is something that happens in these situations, and you can go, hey, you know what, I'm going to give you a day where I'm going to talk to the homeowner after you figure out what the problem is, let you do your job without anybody bothering you. And I promise you, I will be finished within the time frame that you give me. Like, that is my commitment to you. So I'm not going to slow you down. Then I think that they get on board, right? Like, we want work to be more enjoyable as a species. Now, salespeople, that's a little bit different, because you want to talk about coin operated. That is it, right? And so one of the things that we know from a sales perspective is one of the easiest ways to get a new sale is to sell to somebody who's bought from you before, right? And so these conversations, and also they're hearing a lot from their customers going, hey, it'd be really great if this, that, and the other. And they don't always have a mechanism to give that back to the feedback or to the product team, right? And so this is an opportunity for you to say, hey, we're actively exploring opportunities for you to make more money or to gain longer client loyalty, because oftentimes salespeople get paid, monthly on retained business. And you say that, and then you tell them, here's what we're going to do. We're going to ask them specifically about the product. We're going to ask them what's going really well. And we're going to try to figure out ways that we can give you to resell to them, to upsell to them, to charge them more for these products. If that's like, if they have more value and we can ameliorate it just enough that there's value there, and how we can help you retain them. And then I would actually ask salespeople, what are some of the things that I should ask these people? And maybe even the HVAC people, like, get them involved. What are some questions that I should ask that can help us better serve? When you're coming to them, there's an old saying, my great grandpa used to say it. And so that's why I think it's old. I don't know if other people say it or not, but it's, if you want advice, ask for money. And if you want money, ask for advice. And salespeople know this. Really good account managers and salespeople know this, that if you're asking people for advice around how we can do these things, they get buy-in and they get really excited about it. And then when you actually come back to them and say, hey, we listened to what you said, we built what we thought solves this problem, and now we're going to allow you to test it and give feedback. When people have skin in the game, they're so excited about this, right? And so it makes your salespeople look like a hero. They keep selling and making money. And you as an organization, make sure that you're building the right things that allow them to continue to do that.
And I'm curious, going beyond the theory of this, where have you seen this work really well?
Yeah. I get to work with a really cool company called Share More Stories. They have a product called Seek. And it's a mix of, they have a proprietary AI, and then they also have humans behind the data that they use. But what they do is they create, we've talked about stories a few minutes ago. They actually have built a system where they can take people's stories, they can synthesize it, they can create actionable data points, and then give them back to organizations so that they can impact their client experience, their employee experience, and their product innovation. And so it's really fun to watch, because the questions that they're asking are things like, they work with a lot with travel companies. And so they'll ask travelers, hey, tell me about a time that you went to the airport and you experienced a delay. And then it's actually a platform. So you can either talk to it or you can type in it. And then they take all of the stories of all of the people who have experienced this, and they create actionable data points. And some of these around the emotions that they feel and how that ties to behavioral buying psychology. And some of it revolves around, like, what do they wish that they had? What support do they wish that they had? And this is where the product innovation comes in. So I know they worked with a 200-person company. So, pretty good size, not too long ago. And they were using stories to understand what are the emotional drivers that allow people to adopt a new product. And all of this happened through stories. And so they were able to come back and say, pretty definitively to this organization, here are all of the things that people are feeling whenever they are evaluating whether or not they're going to adopt a new product. And let's figure out how we can utilize that to help motivate people to adopt the new product as you're starting to retire a different product. And it's been very, very successful. So it's so fun to kind of watch how technology has changed the way that we're able to gather and synthesize information and what we're able to get out of that.
And that's an awesome service. And share more stories. Is that something that listeners, they can go to share more stories to help kind of get customer feedback or synthesize it?
Yeah, they have a couple of different options. So they have a self-service product with Seek where you can actually build out these, I hate to say surveys because it's so much more than a survey, but you can build out a Seek session and you can send it out. Or they can actually help facilitate that for you with a more custom thing. So they're on Share More Stories on LinkedIn. Their founder is James Warren, and he tells some of the best stories on LinkedIn. So he's probably my favorite person to see pop up on my LinkedIn feed every day.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll definitely check James out and then find a way to use their product Seek for an upcoming customer discovery that we have. And one thing that I think is very low-hanging fruit when it comes to folks who go and take the effort to get the stories, to talk to the customers, is sharing these stories. And I've gotten to see this at really big companies where someone is doing the painstaking work of doing the customer research. I would tend to agree with you around the word survey. Like I don't like the multiple choice surveys are very rarely useful, especially when it comes to like innovation and doing things that are relatively groundbreaking or changing. And then if you're convinced of sitting down and talking to your customers, maybe recording these, there's gold in there that every single one of your employees wants to hear and they don't know to ask for. And it really helps them align to what the company stands for, why they are getting up and coming to this workplace compared to anywhere else they could be, and what service they're doing the world. And there's no better way to hear it from customers. And this doesn't have to be customers talking about just everything the product's doing well. It could be talking about new problems that we could solve, whether they're problems we haven't solved or we haven't necessarily solved correctly yet. And there's something about the emotion that is carried in the specific language that customers use that just, you can't synthesize that into bullet points on a slide deck. And unfortunately, a lot of the times we would see very, very senior executives making like tens of millions of dollars a year, trying to place these big, big bets of hundreds of millions of dollars on bullet points without listening to the emotion, without feeling it. And so one thing we would love doing is we would love bringing the chief decision maker along to at least one or two of the interviews out of 5 to 10 that we like to do. If not, at least getting them to commit to listening to the audio clips, if not the video of the ones that we record. And then I think today with AI, there's a lot better tools. Maybe Share More Stories is an example of one that carries both the context in a synthesized, summarized way, but also doesn't leave out the emotional component, which I think is like a very important driver.
Yeah.
And I think playing innovation like a team sport, providing, like you said, the context on why we're doing this. I think around the context and why, we don't have to ask questions about everything. There's usually 3 or 4 big bets we're looking to place that could make a huge difference 1 to 3 years out. And within those, there's like specific assumptions that keep you up at night more, give you more pause. Right. You can start right there of like, hey, I'm trying to learn more about this specific element of how the customer sees it, of how bad this problem is. Is it a headache or a migraine? And so we can make some internal decisions around how much to invest in it, to really focus those little discussions too. And then maybe you have a different focus every month instead of trying to do everything all at once where you never get started.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you have any other stories that come up around how this is really a team sport versus something that only the innovation and product departments have to be accountable for.
You hit on something that just made my mind go. Last week, I had 2 moments where I had to call customer service for help. And I always do the survey at the end. Like, we talk about the surveys because, listen, I've been in organizations where we've used like the Gartner NPS score. And that is always just so interesting because, as you said, it doesn't really pull the emotion in. I had 2 surveys at the end of customer service calls. Both of them were financial institutions. So, like, I'm going to go apples to apples here. One of them was, did we solve your problem today? Yes or no? That was the only question that they asked. The other one said, would you hire the person who helped you today if you owned a business in this industry? Yes or no? 2 one-question surveys. And it was a yes or no, right?
Mm-hmm.
What they didn't ask me on the first one was, how long did it take? How frustrating was it for you? They did solve my problem. I was so pissed off by the time they got to solving my problem. And I'm like somebody who walks into customer service nice, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had to press 18 buttons. I had to enter my social security number 4 times. I got tossed around. It took a lot of work to solve my problem. The other one also took a lot of work to solve my problem. And so the answer would have been yes on both of them. But what I loved about the second question was, how did I feel about the person I interacted with?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer was yes. Like, if I could find them on LinkedIn, I probably would actually hire them. That's the thing. So it's very different how we're asking questions, and that's still a yes or no question, but it feels like a story question, you know? I'm in sales. I'm going to go back to your other question now. I'm going to squirrel. I'm in sales. I've been in sales for a long time. And one of the things that I found is that I spend more time with potential customers and with our customers, because I also tend to do account management, than anyone else in the organization ever will, which means that I have a direct line to figuring out what's going well for them, what's not going well for them. And I've been in organizations where it's absolutely impossible to give that feedback to anyone and make any measurable difference in their experience, what we're building, any of those things. And that's really frustrating because it means that, you know, one of these companies is a Fortune 100 company, and we had, 60,000 employees, and we had it's millions of customers, and there was nowhere that I could go to say, hey, I have heard every single day for the last 12 months, customers saying, if you would only, and then saying the exact same thing. There's nothing. And I've had other organizations that make it pretty easy to work with the product innovation teams and bring these ideas. One of them was ADP, the big red payroll company. And we kept hearing, if we could just find someone with you, like a company with your level of expertise to run our HR for us, it would make our life so much easier. We developed business process outsourcing, BPO. And it was a huge win. Then we started selling it, and we're selling it to, so basically what that means is if you have a 500-person organization and you have someone who calls HR, BPO is actually someone from ADP picks up the phone and says, Tyler's HVAC service, HR, how can I help you? Oh, you need to reset your password? I can help you with that. Oh, you need a copy of your employee handbook? You have a question about your benefits? Whatever. So it cuts down a lot of costs for a company that's, say, 200 to 500 people. We were primarily selling it to law firm, like very tech firms, very, high-end companies that wanted this amazing experience. I walked into a wood processing center. So they make 2x4s, in the middle of nowhere, Virginia. And I was talking to the HR guy, and he said, and no meanness here, he was like, one of my biggest problems is that every single person on my staff knows how to type their name into a computer, but it might not be their forte. And I spend all of my time helping them to do the most simple things from an HR perspective. They don't know how to set up bank accounts. They don't know about direct deposit, like these types of things. And we sold them BPO, and it was life-changing for the employees and for the HR team. But and then, of course, we started changing, like getting feedback from them. How can we help organizations like this? And that very quickly became one of our largest drivers of growth, were companies that we had never even anticipated would be a good fit for this. And we built a lot of features and functionality around that.
I'm curious on that point. There's a couple of things with this BPO
Mm-hmm.
and having like, if I'm someone who struggles to do a certain thing, even if I'm not someone who likes being on the phone, and it's easier to be on the phone with someone who knows how to do this versus myself trying to like further run into this brick wall. There's a lot of benefit to this, so I can see the value proposition. I also, kind of going back to your previous thing, like feel like people have maybe like over-engineered a lot of the call centers, and we've done it for efficiency. We've looked at them as cost centers, not as opportunity centers or profit centers, strategic profit centers,
Right.
where you're able to kind of earn more trust, learn more about your customers. And there's this wave of companies rushing towards using generative AI to solve this kind of profit center problem or replace their call centers with AI. And I feel like there's some places where it makes sense. And then other places where it just seems like the biggest risk to have AI try and do this. And I'm curious if you've kind of figured out any sort of hunches around where it's maybe a little bit more okay and where you would steer one of your customers far away from replacing their telephone hotline with AI.
Yeah. I mean, I think that if you look at the human element of things, I mean, candidly, if it were me and my clients, I would go like, hey, if you had this problem and you called and you got an AI response that made it hard for you to solve the problem, how would you feel about that? Because because it's your problem, right? If people feel like this. And I think there are very few areas where we can completely replace the human elements with AI. And so I think we need to, as we're starting to do this, at the very least, especially if there's any type of risk of client attrition or reputational risk, whatever it is, marry the two together. This is why in my opinion, this is the best use of AI, is when you use it to help humans human better, right? Like you don't need to completely replace the human. Maybe eventually that happens, but you can't just do it like that, right? Like take the small steps, figure out how you use it as a support tool to make them better, faster, more able to resolve issues, whatever it is. And then slowly build on that, figure out what's working and slowly build on that. And that's not an easy answer to give, because I think a lot of times companies look at AI and go, oh, we can use this to save costs. And from a macro and microeconomic moment right now, there are a lot of things that people are looking and going, we need to do this in order to increase our runway enough that we can stay open, right? Like if we don't do something here, then a lot of people's jobs are at risk. And so we're willing to take this area of risk.
There might be a question of why is your FAQ page so hard, but a voice assistant may be able to help some simple tasks. But oftentimes I feel like most of us are calling in because we tried doing it online and we couldn't.
Right.
And so thinking about an AI being able to do something better than your online system may be the case if your AI is somewhat like abstracted or has like a different API layer that it can connect to that even like your legacy system online can't. Maybe AI can. Probably not the case.
Right.
So the chances of you solving my problem that I couldn't solve for myself by using a voice bot feels low.
Yeah.
The kind of litmus test I've seen kind of goes back to the core of what you're talking about whether those stakeholders feel like there is value in these customer conversations beyond necessary evil of, well, I have to have a phone number or I need to have a customer support line, versus this is an opportunity center where I'm able to learn so many more things. I'm able to maybe provide. We had an episode with ESPN recently. Then they're part of Disney, and then the guy talked about how Doug talked about how there were systems that they provided their call center agents that showed the agents everything that they knew about this customer, what they like to watch, what other things other folks have written in about the notes, and you're able to have a warm, friendly conversation. And then on the other hand, we had a guest recently, Ryan Collins, talk about how they, for very cheap, put all the MP3s from their call center into a gaming device and had an LLM transcribe it. And then they made a simple UI that allowed their employees to ask questions of the conversations that were happening. And this is in a highly regulated environment where they weren't allowed to put this stuff in the cloud and stuff. And they found, I think, an innovative way for very cheap to do it without privacy concerns or breaking the bank. And in their case, they realized like a lot of their questions that were being asked were actually information questions.
Yeah.
Of like how they ran a garbage company, and it's amazing how innovative they are for talking trash essentially. And they realized that, hey, there's just a few things missing on our website, and that's why people are calling in. Let's update our website. And the thing that happened in their case is that, surely enough, not all of them are informational. So there are some complaints. But it's the complaint questions that work their way up into the lunchroom or up the management chain.
Right.
So when you get to like the managing director role that he's in, he's only hearing that the call center is for complaints and worrying that they may have to hire like a PR firm or something to really change their perception, and realizing that when you've got the actual data, it's a small subset of the calls that are complaints of important things they need to fix. But a majority of the calls they could solve by just putting more information on their website, and they wouldn't know what information to put unless they looked at the data. And
Right.
then it became very obvious that here's the top 5 questions. Let's just make sure the stuff is front and center.
Yeah, do it. So you score the data and then you segment it. You look for patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so you're not just listening to the volume of opinions, right? But you're actually trying to find patterns and then figure out. There's a guy, he's actually based in Richmond, Virginia, and I've never met him, but he wrote a book called They Ask You Answer. And it's actually a marketing book, but I'm fascinated by it because his concept is, he's a pool company. They did pool installation. And he was trying to figure out how to make the company successful. And what he's finding is that his salespeople were spending a lot of time answering a lot of the same questions. And then after they answered the questions, they would lose the clients because they wouldn't be qualified, right? So he started taking every single sales call and he wrote down every question anyone ever asked. And he figured out of those questions, what could he create content around? So whether it was FAQs, white papers, video moments, like put it on the website, whatever it was, he made it his mission to answer every single question that, and with full transparency, that were being asked on client calls, including cost, which is something that I think a lot of companies, like pool companies, will keep to the back because they just want to be able to have the conversation and convince you. So people would be like, yeah. Like a pool sounds great. I definitely want it. When can you do it? How long does it take? Oh, wait, what does it cost? And then they would say what it costs and they would be like, ooh, I need to talk to my partner about this, or I'm not sure if I could do it. Do you have financing? Oh, I don't know, all of these things. So they answered all the questions, which meant that first they became a trusted advisor to all of their clients. Mm-hmm. Second, by the time people actually filled out the form to get information, they knew all of the stuff. The only questions that they had were, how does this apply to me directly? Right? How does this apply to my situation? The pool that how much does the pool that I want cost? Mm-hmm. How long would it take to get the pool put in my backyard rather than how much does a pool cost? That means that they're so far through the buying process at this point that they can visualize it. They've made plans. They've self-qualified for it. All of those things. Suddenly, their salespeople were closing so many more deals. They were getting fewer calls in, fewer leads, which maybe on the surface doesn't look great. But the ones that they were getting had pre-qualified themselves. They were ready to go. They had all the information that they need other than how does this apply to me. Their closing rates just skyrocketed and the revenue skyrocketed. But if you looked at just the data, where it's like suddenly all of the inquiries like plummeted, you would be like, oh shit, this is not a good choice, right? But it was really good for them. He wrote a book and now he travels around and talks about this all the time instead of selling pools.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, so market Sheridan, they ask, you answer.
We'll make sure to have that in the show notes. I think something I really like about that, and I've noticed this myself, when we start to grow our team and we start to delegate things, sometimes we step away from things that are uncomfortable. And in my case, certainly it was sitting through and sifting through a lot of data. I'm a little bit more of a bullet point person, but sometimes when it really matters, like it did for him, he went through and did something that he had probably delegated by then. And he was able to apply his founder level instincts to things that are much harder to explain to a salesperson. And it may take a while before some of your salespeople are able to do that, and maybe not even worth kind of going down this path. I'm curious if you have any other stories.
I do. One that's very timely, actually. I work for a company called Duckbill, and we do a couple of things. We work to help build FinOps organizations. We help optimize cloud costs. And the big thing that we do, kind of our bread and butter, is that we help support contract negotiations with cloud providers, specifically AWS. That kind of tends to be the sandbox that we play in the most. And a little over 2 years ago, I had a one-on-one with my CEO, who's also my boss. We're relatively small. And it was in, April or May. And I said, for Christmas this year, what I want you to build me is some sort of system internally where I can put our clients' cloud contracts into it. And also we're already hooked into their spend, their actual spend. So I can have a visualization all the time of how they are spending on cloud in relationship to their commitments to their cloud provider. Because for me, from a sales perspective, this is money. Like, this is so gold. I can look at that. And this, all I wanted was like an internal thing. I can look at that and I can go to my clients and I can say, hey, looks like you've already exceeded your commits to AWS. Let's talk about what it would take to do a mid-cycle renegotiation. And so I'm bringing them value. I'm proactively showing them something that we can do to help. And I'm also teeing myself up for a multi-$100,000 sale, right? This is great. And then I could also go to them and say things like, hey, looks like, maybe your spend is skyrocketed over here on your storage. Has something changed? Like, what's going on there? And do you have a gut intuition that that's something that you could optimize? Would you like our help with that? And my CEO looks at me, he's like, that's impossible. If somebody could build it, they already would have. Right? And I was like, well, damn, that sucks. Then a few weeks later, we were on our one-on-one and he goes, hey, I want to show you something. And he shares a screen and he pops up a first version of what I asked for. And I was so excited. I was like, are you going to build this for me? And he goes, better than that. We're going to build it for clients because we think it has a ton of value for them. It really sits, if for those of you who know about cloud, like FinOps is this moment where if you think about a Venn diagram, there's like procurement, finance, and engineering, and you need something that sits in the middle or someone who speaks all of the languages. And he said, we can build this to be that. So it can give the KPIs to finance that they need for making financial decisions around cloud. It can give the KPIs that they need to procurement to better negotiate their contract with their cloud provider. And it can give information to engineering to show like what are some of the services that they might be able to leverage when they're building that will cut down costs, but still allow them to deliver the thing to the client that they're trying to build. And we actually just launched it a couple of weeks ago. So it's been a work in progress, a couple of years building it. And we launched the V1 for clients and it's making a massive difference. They're hooking their stuff and they're looking at it and they're going, oh, wait, AWS promised that they were going to give us credit, like these credits for these things, and they've never materialized. And there's no one in our organization who's tasked with making sure that that happens. And now we can go to AWS and say, hey, you owe us a certain amount of like $10,000 or $100,000 or $1 million in credit. And only because they've kind of hooked into this. And so from a product innovation perspective, this started with me as a salesperson going, how can I increase our revenue? Or because I'm a salesperson, how can I increase my revenue?
Mm-hmm.
How can I increase our revenue? And then it turned into how can we help customers by creating something that doesn't exist that serves massive value for them across multiple areas of their organization. And it's growing like wildfire. Everyone we show it to is just so excited about it. And so that's just another moment where it's like, hey, talk to the people who are talking to customers. And if you don't have people who are talking to customers, figure out a way to talk to them. Because to me, that's the only way that you can reliably look at product innovation and make sure that you're making the best choices possible to deliver what clients want and also to not waste time and money from an organizational perspective.
There's so many things I love about this that I'd love to share for the audience. The first is kind of having that feedback ladder, like we started off with, between the CEO and yourself, where you're someone who is in front of customers all day and you've already been provided with the vision around how the value is created for your customers. So out of all the ideas of things that you could solve for them, you're kind of working within a relatively focused area.
Right.
And then you're looking to optimize for that form of value. Now, this product could really cannibalize the existing business. Maybe not, right? And if you guys weren't going to do it, someone else might have. So again, I think, it's amazing that you're taking the bold move yourself. Thirdly, even for something that initially, I think there's human nature and sort of some level of self-protection where we assume that what your CEO initially did of like, that's impossible. Someone would have already done it. And scratching beyond the surface of that with today's vibe coding tools is a lot easier to try and answer that question versus assuming that it's going to be like a minimum 6-figure spend and it's going to take a number of months. And by then maybe we'll be distracted versus now, you can pull some stuff together pretty quickly. So testing these hunches is a great way to go about it. All started from when you wanted to bring more value to your customers. And in your case, you were incentivized maybe pretty directly, like you mentioned, coin operated. But the truth is, I would wager that most of the folks on your team that come into work want to come in and do a good job. And it's a matter of leadership kind of pointing out what good job, not just as individuals is, but as a company, how we're going to go out and solve this big problem in the world, at which point you can start to get ideas in the top of the hopper that are across the board in terms of like, okay, if that's the villain of our story, let's think about all these different ways in which we can try and defeat this villain. So as we wrap up here, April, there's a few things that I'd love to hear, and we ask a lot of our guests. So the first one is, you've mentioned a few tools and resources for us to get started that we'll have in the show notes. I'm curious if there's anything we didn't talk about in terms of a course or a book or anything, especially for the folks who can't come do your product innovation course.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of go-tos that I spend a lot of time on. One is like, it's kind of a crazy thing, but I think that we forget about some of the things that we have and being creative is the TED Talk app. If you turn it on and just pick Surprise Me, when you're driving, you can have your Waze on or whatever, and you can listen to TED Talks and it just picks for you. And I can't tell you how many times I've been listening to something about astrophysics and then the next one comes on and it's about interpersonal relationships. And suddenly something will click across the two like very dichotomous subjects. And I'll go, oh, wait, that reminds me of something that my client was talking about the other day. Let me see if I can dig into that. So that's something I use a lot. I also use Blinkist. I don't know if any,
Mhm.
I'm not somebody who will sit down and read a business book because let's be candid. Most business books are like a couple of really amazing gems of wisdom and then a bunch of like bullshit fluff throughout the rest of it. So you can get 152 pages and get published. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So I use Blinkist. I listen to it on a regular basis. I try to listen to at least one book a day. It takes 12 to 15 minutes. You get all of the ideas kind of synthesized. And if something really, really speaks to me, then I will go get the book and actually read it. Um, and then I think the company Headway, it has a
Mhm.
really cool book that you can order. And it's like 50 business books, and they've put them into visual mind maps. And so it's just like 2 pages per book. I have really crazy ADHD. And so for me to be able to open a page, like a book, and look at it for 45 seconds and come up with one thing that I can maybe implement for the day is great for me. And then the last thing is a book that I always have my students read. It's called Rocket Fuel. And it basically, have you read this? It's like,
Mhm.
I love it because it talks about creating teams that work together like puzzle pieces. Like there are definitely gaps in my knowledge and my ability that if I find the right person, they can fill those in. And when you're building a team, and you get all the team members in place that fill in each other's gaps, you create this complete puzzle, like a complete picture, right? I think you can also do that with product innovate, like when you're trying to innovate, is take lots of different like small things within your organization to get feedback. And if you can map those together like a puzzle, then you also get a much more complete picture. So those are the ones that I use on a day-to-day basis. And I think I'm definitely smarter than I would be without them. So you know, that's a win.
I love that. And so the next couple of questions are stemming from the fact that a lot of folks come here to learn about how to foster engaged teams who ship delightful products. And so I'm curious if you have a favorite team or a North Star team that you think about when you're giving your students encouragement or forming your own team. This doesn't have to be a real team. I'll take fictional teams too.
My fictional team, these are actually the people I surround myself with. So this is not fictional. This is my life. I do a couple of things. Number one is Simon Sinek talks about this idea around having a challenge network. And I bastardize this a little bit. I say it's people who give enough of a fuck about you to tell you the truth, right? Like if you say, hey, I want to do this, these are not people who will say, oh, yeah, sure, that'll be great. Like do it. I'm sure you can do it. You're so talented. There are people who care enough about your success that they're going to go, hey, have you thought about this? Or I've seen this. Can I challenge that idea a little bit? Not to yuck your yum, but to make sure that you have a higher chance of success. So I think build a challenge network around you, build a challenge network internally. It is not easy for someone who is a salesperson or someone who's on a product innovation team to look at a CEO and go, hey, I don't know who ties your shoelaces for you in the morning, but the fact that we're doing this is really stupid. But if you like create systems and you create a culture where there are pockets of time where people can say things like that without repercussion, without fear of repercussion, then you win. And if you only create an organization where you're getting positive feedback because people are afraid that they'll get fired or that they'll sound like they're whining, then you lose. That's just the way that it is. And then I think as well, something that we miss out on in business, because running and growing a business is hard. Coming up with products that are going to be the next thing is hard. There's a lot that's attached to that. But install a little bit more whimsy in your life. Like open the doors for people to get whimsical. So if you're brainstorming, make the magic of that happen by creating an environment where you can get funny and silly and out of this world a little bit, because you'd be surprised what types of solutions to problems come when people just get like a little giddy and just start throwing out random stuff. And so, do that. So people who care enough about you, who want you to succeed, and people who will have fun with you, That's a good combination.
I love that list. And then the last one is around the delightful products. Is there anything that you got to unbox recently or an experience you got to have that just totally blew your socks off where you're like, hey, these folks just, they don't just get it done. They actually like truly get it.
Yeah. I'm one of those people who does not read directions. I don't want to read directions. I have zero, it's just not going to happen. I'm going to kind of like muddle through. And I recently purchased a piece of furniture from Wayfair. And it's like the most ridiculous thing is this totally bejeweled and bedazzled electric fireplace for my bedroom. And I'm really excited about it. But what's fun about it is like, yes, it comes with instructions. Obviously, those got like, they slid under the couch. I'll never see them again until the cleaners come like get them out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I pulled it out, it was so self-explanatory because of the little stickers that they had put on each piece, like how they went together, that I literally didn't need them. And it was so lovely. Like I just poured myself a glass of wine and I opened that thing up and I never had to look at any piece of instruction to put it together. And when it was done, it just looked gorgeous. And I was so excited. I was like calling people and saying, hey, the manufacturer of this piece of furniture gets me. I never want to buy anything that I have to look at an instruction manual for again.
I love that so much. I think based on your recommendations earlier of Blinkist and Headway, all of these things that I use, I think because our brains are probably wired very similarly. Absolutely. Like initially, my brothers would often call me like, they would be disparaging. I'd get made fun of growing up around how I never read instructions. I'm the brother who breaks things.
Mhm.
And I think over the years, I've given myself a little bit more grace compared to that narrative and said that, hey, you know what? I like to learn by doing
Mhm.
versus by reading. And you know what? Like it may be good for you to learn from other people's mistakes, but I truly understand the domain by going in there and getting started on my own and making my own mistakes. And then you optimize differently where,
Right.
now if I know I'm going to make a mistake anyway, then I try and like reduce the surface area of risk in terms of how bad this could be in terms of what I'm breaking. But if it's like something that you can return on Wayfair, then the risk is really low
Yeah.
compared to like having to sit in a box for months because I didn't want to read the instructions, and
Yeah.
now we never had the bedazzled fireplace.
Right.
So I Speechify is maybe one that I will add to that list. Is my favorite $100 or $200 or whatever that I pay every year because you can take a photograph of any text and it will put it to you in a very human sounding way. And they figured this out like well before the latest kind of AI services have been able to do it. And so I've got a little bit of loyalty to Speechify to add to that list of folks or list of products.
Yeah.
Cool. And then what is the best way that you like for folks to get a hold of you if they want to carry this conversation on?
I am pretty unhinged on both LinkedIn and Instagram. They're almost interchangeable for me. So if you're somebody who wants to come in the comments and say this isn't Facebook on LinkedIn, then just don't even bother. Like just block me immediately. But if you like a little bit of unhinged, fun, whimsical content, then I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram both as Hot Mess Boss. So easy to find me there, but and I am slow to respond on DMs, but I do try to respond at some point. So and if you connect with me, then I'm also probably going to be all up in your content and your comments and helping engage and make conversations happen. So that's like my favorite thing that I do any day.
Awesome. Hot Mess Boss. We'll make sure to have links in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for making time for us. This was super delightful.
Yeah, thank you. This was so fun.
Hey, folks. Hope you enjoyed that recording with April Palmer. There were a few things that I wanted to make sure I remembered, and I want to share them with you as well. So here are 4 or 5 takeaways for me from this episode. The first one, I had heard the word amelioration before, but never really stopped to find out what it really meant. And I love how she described it. And I think it happens time and time again. Oftentimes we'll have folks come in and have a conversation with us about wanting to build this really big game-changing software, but not know where to get started. And what's helpful here is that taking this approach that she talked about not only helps get you started, but it also helps you find ways to pay for it right away and see results right away so you can continue sustaining things financially and from a budget standpoint, but also have confidence on an ongoing basis. And so, this pattern that she talked about of start with something that's already familiar and then remove friction or create better distribution and then have a feedback loop has been something that folks in the industry have done before. Like, I think both Uber and Airbnb did not invent lodging or rides. What they did was they changed the workflow and the distribution using mobile and a marketplace, which is very much like the make existing things easier and more dynamic thing that April was talking about. Another thing that I'm reminded of here is how working back from the intent that you want to have and what change you want to have for your customer is a key piece. And this is something that Amazon has spoken about very publicly in terms of writing that outcome out and then having all of the effort going into the initiative work back from that outcome that's written down. So I think those are a couple places. And if you're running a business, even if it's not a technology business, I don't think that a new software is usually the first place to start. I think starting with small operational loops and removing friction using whatever minimum amount of technology required is an amazing way for you to get started, build momentum, but really allow you to start today in moving away from being someone who's maybe not necessarily an innovator in your industry to moving forward in terms of where you sit across amongst your competitors. The second thing that she talked about was how feedback without a return message can become emotional labor. So I think it's really great that a lot of you are starting to ask your customers for feedback. You are maybe even asking your employees, like she talks about her sales staff, in terms of getting input around what decisions we need to make and how to make those decisions. I think something that you can really maximize that effort of gathering this input and not creating emotional labor for the stakeholders around you that you're asking for input from is by providing a return message. Now, I know this can be uncomfortable because sometimes this return message is like, hey, thanks for the input, but we're not going to listen to what you suggested. And there's a few things about this. I think sometimes when suggestions are provided, where we seek solutions and new features and ask people what else we should be building as opposed to what other problems we should be solving, that can be one area where it just becomes really hard to provide feedback because your customers, maybe even your sales folks who aren't like seeing things with more centralized picture like a product team might, doesn't necessarily see the common themes in terms of the varying solutions and inputs that come in. But if you go to the problems, there's usually a lot more of a commonality. So this allows you to turn this back into a return message where you say, hey, while we didn't go forward with the solution that you proposed, your input did help us highlight a pretty important problem that we're going to go down this path to solve, for example. So various ways in which you can provide a feedback loop, thank people for providing this input, gives them a lot of emotional energy. I think that helps them feel like they're part of the process. And I think that will over time outweigh, even if you didn't choose their specific suggestions, knowing that they did help, even if you decided to go in a different direction. The next one is around ride-alongs. This is one of my favorite techniques for a business like that HVAC business that we kind of talked about briefly, where if you have technicians who already have invitations from your customers to go meet with them, and usually if you're a plumber or an HVAC technician, you're doing 4 or 5 visits a day. Doing a ride-along alongside them, maybe you're the business owner, maybe you can put someone with not just good technical skills, but also a combination of technical skills as well as office credibility and then give them specific questions to go out and help you de-risk because they're going to lead to big impactful decisions that are more on the make or break side versus the it won't matter side. It is something that even with having a ride along done for, a day, maybe a week, can get you 5 to 20 data points in that case. And if you can be very intentional about the question or the big decision or the uncertainty that you're trying to learn more about, and then spend some time with, things like mom test or something else in terms of resources to craft questions that are not going to be leading the witness in this case. Very short interactions with your customers can help you gain a ton of insight that when brought back to the office can help you decide where you're placing these chips when you're placing your bets, and help you feel a lot more confident, especially if you develop a habit around this and then you're placing smaller bets that lead to compounded, huge, innovative changes. So I think that story that she talked about with that company, I think it was share more stories, was particularly useful because in today's AI world, synthesizing this information and asking follow-up questions about it, combining this primary research with secondary research of other things that people have already published in your space is easier than ever, not just for you, but also your competitors. So I'm glad she mentioned an offering out there with this company, Share More Stories. But I think it's something that even if you're not ready to make a big enough commitment like this, having someone do a ride along, maybe do the ride along yourself for just 1 week. It's blocking off 1 week in your calendar to see how you can turn customer insights into a de-risking factor for critical decisions will enable you to be bolder, be more audacious, place bigger bets because you have confidence in a way to go gather the insight that none of your competitors are. So I really like that point there as well. And then the last one that I want to have as a clarification is, despite the title of this episode maybe, or what we talked about in terms of how your sales team can be extremely insightful for your product innovation and determining things on your product roadmap, I don't want this to be confused of going to the sales team and asking them what features will sell. There is a more in-depth conversation that we need to have here, and it's really asking the sales team more about the problem that we're looking to solve today. And I bet you if you ask 5 salespeople what features, they're going to come back with 5 different answers. But if you ask them what problem you're solving, that might whittle down from 5 down to 1 or 2. And then you're switching from trade-offs around features and solutions to determining which problems are most worth solving for your customers. And time again, it's proven much easier to prioritize and allocate resources, capital, focus, energy, and everything else when we think about what problem we're looking to solve, and especially which segment of our customers we're looking to solve it for. And then things like the features and how we do it and how we use tech and stuff become way easier and almost intuitive and seamless if we can be really clear about determining the for who and the for what. So those are my takeaways, and I'm going to try and remember for my own business as well as the business owners that we help over here. If you are feeling like you want a soundboard around where to place your innovation, how to take your customer insights and convert them into things that can help determine big decisions that you're looking to make around your growth and innovation, hit us up for a office hour session. These are a 30 or 60-minute call. They're free of charge for listeners. Our team here really enjoys hearing about how you're trying to innovate and more about the industry. And we love helping find clarity and ultimately driving focus for your innovation and growth initiatives by bringing our skills and our context and our experience to helping you solve your problems. 30 to 60 minutes is plenty of time. If you're interested, hit us up at office hours at convergence.fm. And someone from the team will be getting back to you to schedule time. I try to attend as many of them as I can, so it'll be a good way for us to meet as well. So look forward to hearing from you then. Otherwise, we'll be back next week with another episode of Convergence.fm, and we will talk to you then. See ya. Podcast today. Subscribe to the Convergence Podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your content. If you're listening and found this helpful, please give us a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button and tell me what you think about what you heard today.